You ever have one of those nights where everything feels so normal that you almost miss the moment your life changes forever? That was me, standing in my parents' cramped kitchen in rural Ohio, holding a chipped coffee mug and listening to the hum of the old bakery ovens downstairs. I had no idea a single offhand comment from my brother's fiancée would ignite a war in our family, one that would rip open secrets we'd all spent decades pretending didn't exist. My name's Claire. I'm 27, the oldest child in the Bennett family, and for most of my life, I've been okay with staying out of the spotlight. My parents, Margaret and Paul, run a small bakery that's been the heartbeat of our town for 20-plus years. It's nothing fancy, but people drive an hour just to buy Mom's cinnamon rolls. Growing up, I spent every holiday behind that counter, powdered sugar in my hair, while my younger brother Daniel, 2 years my junior, charmed every customer with his dimples and quick wit. Daniel was the golden boy. Always has been. When he scraped by with a C in algebra, Dad threw him a hard work pays off party. When I got straight A's and a scholarship, I got a polite good job over dinner. It never used to bother me much. I preferred being invisible. But that all changed the night Daniel brought home his fiancée, Harper. Harper was magnetic, the kind of woman who knows exactly how to make people fall in love with her. Perfect hair, perfect laugh, perfect little digs slipped under a smile so sweet you barely notice the sting until later. She came from money, real money. Her parents owned a chain of car dealerships and vacationed in Aspen. And yet, for reasons I couldn't begin to understand, she treated our family's modest bakery like it was some charming novelty instead of the lifeline it had always been. At first, I liked her well enough. She was friendly, outgoing, and seemed genuinely excited to join our family. But somewhere along the way, her attention turned toward me, and more specifically, toward something I'd never expected anyone outside the family to even know about. 5 years ago, when my grandfather passed away, he left me a trust fund. It wasn't a fortune, but it was significant, enough to buy a small house or start a business, which had been my dream since I was 16. The catch? I couldn't touch it until I turned 30, and it could only be used for life milestones, like education or property. It was a private matter, something I'd barely spoken about even with close friends. But apparently, Harper knew. The first time she brought it up, we were having Sunday dinner. The kitchen smelled like roasted chicken and rosemary, and for once, everyone was laughing. Out of nowhere, Harper set down her wine glass and said, "Claire, isn't it incredible you have that trust fund waiting for you? I mean, what are you even planning to do with all that money?" The table went silent. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. I stammered something about maybe using it for a down payment on a house or investing in a bakery of my own. Harper smiled, too wide, too practiced, and said, "Wow, that's so lucky. You know, Daniel and I were just talking about how much easier our lives would be if we had something like that. Weddings are so expensive these days. Maybe you could help us out?" I laughed because I thought she was joking. Daniel chuckled awkwardly too. But Harper didn't laugh. She just held my gaze, waiting. Before I could answer, Mom jumped in. "That's Claire's money, Harper. It's not up for discussion." Harper's smile never faltered, but something in her eyes shifted. I didn't recognize it then, not fully, but I'd come to know that look well. It was the look of someone who'd just spotted something they wanted and was already calculating how to get it. After that night, Harper's little comments became a pattern. At every family gathering, she found a way to circle back to the trust fund. It's amazing Claire's so well set up for the future. Not everyone's lucky enough to have opportunities like that. Wouldn't it be nice if we could all share in that blessing? At first, I brushed it off. She was probably just making conversation, right? But then Daniel started chiming in, not directly asking, but softening me up. "She's not wrong, Claire. You're in a really good position to help. It's not like you're using the money right now." Something inside me twisted. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the entitlement in their voices. The assumption that my hard-earned security, something I'd never even touched, somehow belonged to them. I tried talking to my parents, expecting backup, but instead I got platitudes. Harper just wants to feel included. Daniel's under a lot of pressure with the wedding. Keeping the peace is more important than being right. That last one stuck with me. keeping the peace. As if peace was something you preserved by handing over your future to appease people who wouldn't hesitate to take advantage of you. The comments kept coming, sharper each time. And then, at Daniel's engagement party, surrounded by relatives, friends, and half the town, Harper cornered me. "Claire," she said, voice syrupy sweet, but just loud enough for nearby ears to catch. "I really think it's selfish for you to sit on that money when it could help family. Don't you want to see Daniel and me start our life together without all this stress?" I swear the room tilted. Whispers rippled through the crowd. For the first time in my life, I felt like the villain in my own family. I managed to mutter something about the trust not being accessible yet and excused myself to the bathroom. I locked the door, braced my hands on the sink, and stared at my reflection. My heart pounded. This wasn't going to blow over. Harper wasn't just making casual comments anymore. She was planting seeds. Seeds I feared were already taking root in my family's minds. And somewhere deep down, in the pit of my stomach, I knew this fight wasn't really about the money. Not entirely. There was something else beneath all of this, something no one had talked about in years. A secret I wasn't supposed to know but had stumbled across by accident years ago. A secret that, if pushed far enough, I wasn't sure I'd be able to keep buried. If dinner that night felt like a spark, the weeks that followed were a full-blown wildfire. Suddenly, every family gathering turned into an ambush. It wasn't subtle anymore. Harper didn't even bother pretending. It started with little jabs. At Mom's birthday dinner, Harper raised her glass and smiled wide. "Here's to family, sharing everything, even the blessings we didn't earn." Laughter rippled through the table, but her eyes stayed locked on me, daring me to react. I didn't give her the satisfaction. Then Daniel joined in. "Come on, Claire," he said one Sunday afternoon, all faux casual. "It's not like you're touching the money yet. Harper and I are just asking for a small part. You'd still have plenty left over when you turn 30. Plenty left over. As if my future dreams, my own plans I'd spent years quietly building, were some optional luxury he could carve pieces out of. I tried talking to my parents again, thinking surely they'd shut this down. Instead, I got the same tired refrain. "Claire, honey," Mom said softly, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "You've always been so responsible. But Daniel's under a lot of stress. Weddings are expensive, starting a life is hard. Can't you help your brother out, just this once?" Dad chimed in, almost pleading. "It's not about fairness, it's about keeping the family together." There it was again. Keeping the family together. Code for, give them what they want, or you're the bad guy. I left that night feeling hollow. For the first time in years, I didn't recognize my own family. The public pressure. Harper didn't stop at family dinners. She started making her case everywhere, loud enough for friends, cousins, even neighbors to overhear. At Daniel's engagement party, she actually pulled me aside in the backyard where half the guests could see and said, "Wouldn't it be so meaningful for everyone if Claire used her inheritance to help us buy our first home? I mean, what's more family than that?" People started murmuring, nodding along. Suddenly, I wasn't just the older sister. I was the selfish older sister with extra money she didn't need. And Daniel, God, Daniel, just stood there, arm around Harper, silent but smiling like her puppet. When I called him out later, he shrugged. "She's stressed," he said. "Besides, she's not wrong. You're in a good spot. It wouldn't hurt to think about it." The shift at home. By the next month, it wasn't just Harper and Daniel. My parents, people I'd trusted my whole life, began to change. They stopped defending me at dinners. They stopped redirecting Harper's digs. Instead, they leaned on me in quiet moments. "Your brother's worked so hard," Dad whispered one night while we closed the bakery. "He's finally settling down. Don't you want him to have what we never could?" And Mom, sweet, selfless Mom, started parroting Harper's words without even realizing it. "It's just money, Claire. Family is forever." No, it wasn't just money. It was my future, my security. And the way everyone suddenly felt entitled to it made me question everything I thought I knew about them. The breaking point, the moment it tipped from uncomfortable to unbearable, happened at what was supposed to be a simple Sunday dinner. We'd barely finished grace when Harper slammed a glossy wedding magazine onto the table and announced, "Daniel and I found the perfect venue, but we can only book it if Claire helps us." The silence was suffocating. All eyes turned to me. "Excuse me?" I asked, voice sharper than I intended. Harper smiled sweetly. "Oh, don't act surprised. We've talked about this for months. Everyone knows it's the right thing to do. Right, Margaret? Paul?" And my parents nodded. In that moment, it hit me. I was alone. The secret I shouldn't know, what no one else realized, not Daniel, not Harper, not even my parents, was that I knew something they didn't think I knew. 5 years ago, just after my grandfather's funeral, I overheard an argument late at night. My parents thought I was asleep upstairs. They were wrong. I heard Dad's voice, low and angry. If she ever finds out why he left the trust to her, and not Daniel. Mom cut him off, panicked. She can never know. It would ruin everything. I never learned the full truth. But I'd carried those words for years, tucked away in the back of my mind. Now, with Harper and Daniel circling me like vultures, I couldn't stop wondering. Was this fight really about money, or about something far darker my family had been hiding all along? I thought the worst part was behind me after that tense engagement party. But I was wrong. It turned out that was only the opening move in what felt like a full-blown war. Over the next few weeks, it wasn't just Harper and Daniel pushing me anymore. It was everyone. Cousins I barely spoke to, aunts who hadn't called in years, even family friends I only saw at Christmas, suddenly felt entitled to weigh in on what I should do with my trust fund. The strangest part was how they all sounded the same, repeating Harper's lines like a rehearsed script. "Claire, you've always been so level-headed. You could really bring the family together by helping them out." It wasn't subtle. It was calculated. I started feeling cornered, like there was nowhere left to breathe. Every family gathering became a performance where Harper played the victim and I was cast as the cold, selfish sister. She had this way of twisting the truth so effortlessly that people believed her without question. Daniel barely spoke at first, but his silence felt like agreement. And slowly, I realized my parents were slipping toward their side too. They didn't confront me outright, but the looks, the sighs, the constant, maybe just think about it for the sake of peace, it was all there. The breaking point came one rainy Thursday night. My parents called me over for what they called a family discussion. I should have known better, but I went anyway. When I walked into their living room, I froze. Not just my parents, not just Harper and Daniel. Half the extended family was there, packed into the room like an intervention. Harper stood front and center, perfectly composed, holding wedding brochures like props. Daniel sat beside her, tense but silent, letting her take the lead. She started in on me almost immediately, her voice smooth but sharp. "Claire, we all know you've been under a lot of stress, but this isn't just about you. This is about family." The murmurs of agreement from around the room were instant, like they'd all been waiting for their cue. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. "If this is about the trust fund again," I said, "we've already talked about this." Harper tilted her head, smiling that practiced smile. "We have, and you've made it clear you don't want to help. But maybe you should hear what everyone else thinks." The room buzzed as relatives chimed in, little jabs disguised as concern. "You're not even using the money yet. It could really help them get started. Isn't family worth more than money?" I felt my throat tighten. It wasn't just a conversation, it was an ambush. Daniel finally spoke up then, his voice low but heavy. "We're not asking for all of it, Claire. It's just enough to make a start. You've always been the responsible one. Why stop now?" I opened my mouth to answer, but then Daniel muttered something under his breath. Quiet, almost like he didn't mean to say it out loud. "She doesn't even know why Grandpa left it to her." The words sliced through the noise, and suddenly the room went still. My heart slammed in my chest. "What did you just say?" I demanded. Daniel froze, eyes wide. "Nothing. I didn't." But Harper shot him a sharp look, one that wasn't guilt, but panic. That was all the confirmation I needed. Something was being hidden from me. Something big. The rest of the meeting blurred into shouting and accusations I barely processed. By the time I walked out into the cold night air, I wasn't thinking about their demands anymore. I was thinking about what Daniel had said. Why had Grandpa left the trust to me and not him? Why did my parents always dodge questions about it? And why did Harper look terrified at the thought of me finding out? That night, my phone buzzed with a call from Aunt Lillian, my mom's older sister. She never called me this late, so I almost didn't answer. Her voice was low, urgent. "Claire, don't let them bully you, and don't give them a dime." My throat tightened. "You're the first person to say that to me. Why are you telling me this?" Lillian hesitated, then said, "There's a reason your grandfather left that money to you. A reason no one wants to talk about. Start asking questions about Daniel, about what happened before your grandfather died. If the truth comes out, everything changes." She hung up before I could say a word. I sat there in the dark, shaking, a dozen thoughts colliding in my head. For the first time, I realized this fight wasn't just about money or a wedding or family politics. It was about a secret, one so deep my parents had buried it for years. And if I wanted to protect what was mine, I'd have to dig it up, no matter what it cost. I couldn't sleep that night after Aunt Lillian's call. Her words looped in my head, a reason no one wants to talk about. By morning, curiosity had turned into obsession. I needed answers, not just about the trust fund, but about why my family acted like I was holding something that didn't belong to me. Every memory of Grandpa suddenly felt sharper, heavier, like pieces of a puzzle I'd ignored for years. The next day, I drove to Lillian's house unannounced. She lived on the edge of town in a small, weathered cottage that always smelled like cedar and strong coffee. When she opened the door and saw me, she didn't look surprised, almost like she'd been expecting me. "You want to know the truth," she said softly, stepping aside. I didn't even answer. We sat at her kitchen table, sunlight slanting through faded curtains, and for a long moment she just stared at me. Then she said, "Your grandfather left you that money because he didn't trust your parents to protect it. And because," she hesitated, her jaw tightening, "because of what Daniel did." The name hit me like ice water. Daniel? He was barely 20 when Grandpa died. "What are you talking about?" Lillian leaned forward. 2 months before your grandfather passed, something happened at the bakery. Something your parents covered up. Daniel stole from him, Claire. Thousands. He drained the account your grandfather used to keep the business afloat. I stared at her, shaking my head. "That doesn't make sense. Daniel was broke back then. He didn't even have a car." "That's exactly why he did it," she said. "He was in deep debt. Gambling. He begged your parents to keep it quiet, and they did, because admitting it would have ruined him. Your grandfather found out, and that's when everything changed. He rewrote his will. He left you the trust because you were the only one he believed wouldn't squander it." My stomach twisted. Pieces started clicking into place. The way my parents always looked guilty when the trust came up. The way Daniel avoided talking about Grandpa entirely. "Does Harper know?" I asked. Lillian's mouth tightened. "She knows enough. That's why she's pushing so hard. She thinks if she marries into the family and gets her hands on that money, it'll fix everything." I felt dizzy, like the floor had dropped out beneath me. For weeks, I'd been defending myself against whispers of selfishness, painted as the villain. And all this time, Daniel had been hiding the truth, the real reason Grandpa cut him out. I left Lillian's house shaken, but with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. I wasn't just protecting my future anymore. I was protecting Grandpa's legacy. But I also knew if I confronted my family head-on, they'd deny everything. I needed proof. For the next week, I started digging quietly. Old financial records, bank statements. Grandpa had tucked away in storage at the bakery. It took time, but I found it. A paper trail showing withdrawals from Grandpa's account months before his death, signed by Daniel. There were even notes in Grandpa's handwriting, bitter and heartbroken. Daniel lied again. I can't trust him. Claire is the only one who cares about this family's future. My hands trembled holding that note. It was everything I needed. Confirmation that I wasn't crazy, that Grandpa had seen through Daniel long before I did. I didn't plan to use it right away. Part of me hoped confronting Daniel privately would end things quietly. But fate had other plans. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. At another, family dinner my parents insisted on hosting. I arrived to find Harper and Daniel already there, dressed like they were heading to a gala, sitting smugly at the table. The tension was suffocating. Halfway through the meal, Harper brought it up, again. "Claire, we can't keep going in circles. This is tearing the family apart. Why can't you just do the right thing?" I set my fork down, my heart pounding. "The right thing? You mean giving you money that was never meant for you?" Daniel's face flushed. You don't get to decide what's fair. Grandpa should have split it between us. I leaned forward, my voice low but steady. Do you really want to talk about what Grandpa should have done? Because I found out why he didn't trust you. Silence. The room went still. Harper's eyes darted toward Daniel, panic flashing across her face. What are you talking about? My father asked sharply. I pulled the folded papers from my bag and placed them on the table. I know about the money, Daniel. The gambling debt. The account you emptied behind Grandpa's back. And I know Mom and Dad covered it up. Gasps rippled around the table. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father's face turned a shade of red I'd never seen before. But Daniel, he didn't deny it. He just sat there, frozen, jaw clenched. Harper recovered first, her voice cold. This doesn't change anything. That was years ago. It changes everything, I snapped. Grandpa left me that trust because he couldn't trust you, and now you're trying to manipulate everyone into handing it over anyway. Daniel finally spoke, his voice breaking. I was desperate, Claire. You don't understand. No, I cut him off. I understand perfectly. You made your choices, and now you're lying to everyone about why I have what I have. The room erupted, shouts, accusations, my parents scrambling to calm everyone down. But in that chaos, I saw it. The cracks forming in Harper's perfect facade, the way Daniel couldn't even look me in the eye. For the first time, I felt the balance shift. When I left that night, the air was thick with silence. No one followed me out. No one tried to stop me. But as I drove home, my phone buzzed, a single text from an unknown number. You don't know everything. Meet me tomorrow, alone. I stared at the message, heart hammering. Part of me wanted to ignore it. But another part, the part that couldn't let go of Lillian's warning, knew this was just the beginning. I didn't sleep that night. The anonymous message kept replaying in my mind. You don't know everything. Meet me tomorrow, alone. I almost deleted it. After weeks of manipulation and betrayal, why would I walk into yet another trap? But something about those words, they felt different. Not threatening, almost like a warning. By morning, curiosity won. I replied with a single question. Where? The answer came quickly. An address on the outskirts of town. An abandoned farmhouse I vaguely remembered from childhood. It felt reckless, but after everything, what did I have left to lose? The next day, I drove there just before sunset. The sky burned orange, casting long shadows over the cracked driveway. My heart pounded as I parked and stepped out, gravel crunching under my shoes. The wind whistled through broken shutters, and for a second I considered turning back. Then I saw her, Aunt Lillian, standing by the porch. You sent the text? I called out, relief and suspicion tangled in my voice. She nodded, eyes darting around like she expected someone to follow me. Claire, there's more you need to know. I didn't tell you everything before, because I wasn't sure you were ready to hear it. My stomach tightened. More than Daniel stealing from Grandpa? Much more. She motioned me inside. Dust coated every surface, and the faint smell of mildew clung to the air. We sat across from each other at a rickety table, her hands trembling as she slid an old envelope toward me. Your grandfather didn't just leave you money, she whispered. He left you leverage. I frowned, opening the envelope. Inside were photocopies of legal documents, property deeds, business contracts, all bearing Grandpa's signature. But one detail leapt out. My parents' names were nowhere on them. In fact, the documents explicitly cut them out. This can't be right, I muttered, scanning the pages. It is, Lillian said firmly. Your parents hid this from you? That trust fund? It's tied to property Grandpa bought years ago, land worth far more than anyone realizes. And Harper? She knows. She's been feeding Daniel information this whole time, hoping to marry in and claim it once you cave. The room spun. Suddenly, all the pieces clicked. The relentless pressure, the family meetings, Harper's smug confidence. This wasn't about a wedding. It was about control, about legacy. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, my voice low. Lillian's eyes softened. Because I watched them turn you into the villain, and I can't stay silent anymore. Before I could respond, headlights flashed through the broken window. A car door slammed. Voices, familiar voices, echoed toward the house. My heart lurched. They followed you, Lillian hissed. Hide the documents. I shoved the envelope into my bag just as the front door burst open. Daniel stormed in, Harper at his heels, my parents trailing behind them, looking frantic. What the hell are you doing here? Daniel barked, eyes narrowing at Lillian. I could ask you the same thing, I shot back, standing my ground. Spying on me now? Harper's gaze swept the room, cold and calculating. We came to stop you from making another mistake. This obsession is tearing the family apart, Claire. Hand over the trust. End this. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You mean hand over everything Grandpa left me so you can clean up Daniel's mess and live happily ever after? Not happening. Daniel's face reddened. You don't understand. No, you don't understand. I cut in, pulling the envelope from my bag and slamming it on the table. I know about the land. I know about the contracts Grandpa signed cutting you out, and I know why he did it. Because you stole from him. Because you lied. Silence. My parents froze. Harper's mask cracked, her eyes flickering with panic before she recovered. This doesn't prove anything, she said, voice trembling. Then explain why you've been pushing so hard, I snapped. Explain why you went behind my back, spreading lies to the entire family. Explain why you're so desperate for money that was never yours. No one spoke. The truth hung heavy in the air. For the first time, I saw them clearly. Not as the family I'd spent years defending, but as people willing to sacrifice me to protect themselves. Finally, my father stepped forward, voice hoarse. Claire, is this true? He asked Daniel. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't have to. The guilt on his face said it all. Harper turned on him, fury boiling over. You told me it was just money. You never said you stole it. Chaos erupted, shouting, accusations, tears. I stood there, strangely calm, like I'd stepped outside my own body. The storm I'd been drowning in for months was finally breaking, and I wasn't the one caught in it anymore. When the noise finally died, I spoke quietly but firmly. I'm done. They all looked at me. I'm done letting you use me, guilt me, manipulate me. Grandpa trusted me for a reason, and I'm honoring that, whether you like it or not. I turned to leave, pausing at the door. You want to fix this family? Start by telling the truth. I walked out into the cool night air, the weight of months of tension lifting off my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Weeks passed. The fallout was messy. Harper broke off the engagement, Daniel disappeared from town, and my parents, they finally apologized. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. With the trust fund still locked until I turned 30, I had time to decide what to do with it, and more importantly, who I wanted in my life when that day came. And as for me, I wasn't bitter, I was stronger. I'd survived the storm, and I'd learned something priceless. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by who stands beside you when the world turns against you. If you found yourself in Claire's shoes, would you have kept the inheritance or walked away from the family entirely? Let me know what you'd do, and don't forget to follow for more stories like this one.